John Mercer opened his eyes to darkness. Cold fluid drained from his cryopod as warning lights flashed red across the ceiling. His muscles burned as he tried to move after decades of sleep. The ship shook violently, throwing him to the metal floor. Warning: hull breach in sections 4 through 7. All personnel report to emergency stations. The ship AI announced, its voice calm despite the chaos. John's training kicked in. He grabbed the emergency kit from his pod and pulled on the jumpsuit inside. His mind raced to catch up. They were supposed to wake up orbiting New Terra, not in the middle of what felt like an attack. "Ship status report," John called out, stumbling as another explosion rocked the Artemis. "Colony ship Artemis is under attack by unknown vessels. Current location is Sector 87 Delta. We are 87 years off projected course." John froze. 87 years? That was impossible. "Where's Captain Lawson? Where's the bridge crew?" "Bridge section suffered direct hit. No life signs detected. You are the highest-ranking conscious officer, Tactical Analyst Mercer." The words hit John like a physical blow. Everyone dead. Thousands of colonists still sleeping. And he was just an analyst, not meant for command. "How many crew are awake?" he asked, making his way to the door. 17 military personnel have been auto-revived due to emergency protocols. The corridor outside was filled with smoke. Emergency lights cast everything in a hellish red glow. John ran toward the command deck, passing frightened crew members who looked to him for answers he didn't have. Lieutenant Rivera appeared from a side passage, blood streaming from a cut on her forehead. "Mercer, thank God. What are those things out there?" "What things? What are we dealing with?" Rivera pulled him to a viewport. Outside, sleek black ships moved with impossible speed around the Artemis. They were unlike any human vessel John had ever seen. "First contact," John whispered. "And they're not friendly." The ship rocked again. A nearby panel exploded, showering them with sparks. "We need to wake the colonists," John said. "Get them to the escape pods." "There's no time," Rivera argued. "Those things are cutting through our hull." John grabbed her shoulders. "We have 5,000 people sleeping on this ship. We're getting them out." For the next 20 minutes, John directed the awakening and evacuation. The ship's systems were failing. Sections were being sealed off as atmosphere vented into space, and the attackers kept coming. John named them the Vraks after hearing their communications, harsh clicking sounds that reminded him of breaking bones. "Last group of pods ready for launch," Rivera reported as they reached the final evacuation bay. Only 3 crew members remained besides them. "Get in," John ordered. Rivera shook her head. "Someone has to launch manually. The systems are fried." "I'll do it, I'm staying." "That's suicide, Mercer." John looked at the frightened colonists in the last pod. Families, children. "Get them home, Lieutenant, that's an order." After the pod sealed, John limped to the control panel. His leg had been hit by shrapnel during the evacuation. He launched the final pods just as the bay doors began to malfunction. He watched the pods disappear into the darkness, carrying humanity's future away from danger. The ship groaned around him, dying. The sound of metal cutting through metal came from the corridor behind him. John turned, grabbing a plasma cutter from a nearby tool rack. It wasn't a weapon, but it would have to do. The door to the bay slid open. 3 tall figures stood there, their bodies covered in armor that seemed to absorb the light. Their faces were hidden behind masks with glowing red sensors. John raised the plasma cutter as blood dripped down his leg, and the ship began to break apart around them. The plasma cutter sliced through the air as John dove behind a cargo container. The Vraks fired, their weapons burning holes in the metal where he had stood seconds before. He crawled through a maintenance hatch as the ship shuddered around him. For 6 days, John lived in the walls of the Artemis. The ship drifted dead in space, its engines destroyed, life support running on emergency power. The Vraks stayed aboard, hunting through the empty corridors. John watched them through security cameras he had rewired. They moved with predatory grace, communicating in clicks and growls. They collected human bodies from the crew who hadn't escaped, taking them to a makeshift lab they had set up in the medical bay. "They're studying us," John whispered to himself, his voice rough from disuse and recycled air. He hadn't spoken to another human in almost a week. He learned their patterns. The Vraks hunted in groups of 3. They slept in shifts. They were stronger than humans, faster too, but they had weaknesses. They couldn't see well in complete darkness. They relied on smell when their vision failed. John set his first trap on day 7. A simple tripwire connected to a pressurized coolant line. The freezing liquid caught a Vrak scout in the face. John finished it with the plasma cutter before it could call for help. He took its weapons, its armor, studied them. The Vrak's gun was designed for hands larger than human ones, but he could make it work. On day 9, John heard something in the ventilation system. Not Vraks. Too small, too careful. He followed the sound to engineering and found a young woman with dirty blonde hair and wild eyes pointing a makeshift spear at him. "Human?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Human," John confirmed. Tactical analyst John Mercer. Engineer Alex Reeves. She lowered her weapon. I thought I was the only one left. Together they were stronger. Alex knew the ship's systems better than John. She helped him hack into the Vrak's communications device he had taken from the dead scout. "They're talking about a fleet," Alex said as they huddled over the alien device in a sealed maintenance room. "I think they're calling for backup." John's blood went cold. "Can you tell where they're heading?" Alex worked on the translation. Her face went pale. "Earth. They're going to Earth." They watched through cameras as more Vraks arrived on smaller ships. The new arrivals brought equipment, weapons. They were setting up for something bigger. "We need to warn Earth," John said. "How?" "Communications are dead." John looked at the Vrak ships docked to the Artemis. "We steal one of their ships." The plan was simple but dangerous. They would capture a Vrak scout, force it to reveal the coordinates of their homeworld, then use that information to plot a course to Earth. They set the trap in the cargo bay. Alex rigged the doors to seal on command while John waited with the alien weapon. When the Vraks entered, everything went according to plan until the doors failed to close. The fight was brutal. John took a hit to his shoulder. The Vraks was stronger, but John was fighting for humanity's survival. He finally subdued it with a shock baton Alex had built from ship parts. They tied the alien to a chair with cable wire. Its mask removed, the Vrax's face was reptilian, with rows of sharp teeth and 4 black eyes that watched them with hatred. "Tell us about the fleet heading to Earth," John demanded. The Vraks laughed, a horrible sound like grinding metal. "Your world is already burning, human. You are too late." John and Alex looked at each other, desperation in their eyes. They had to get to Earth, even if it meant piloting the damaged Artemis on a suicide run into the Vrak's mothership. As they prepared the ship's remaining engine for one final burn, a new alert sounded. Something massive had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel nearby. On the view screen, a ship unlike any they had ever seen approached. Neither human nor Vraks. The new ship fired on the Vrak's vessels without warning. Blue energy beams cut through their hulls like paper. John and Alex watched in stunned silence as their enemies were destroyed in seconds. "Are they friendly?" Alex whispered. "I guess we'll find out," John replied, gripping his stolen Vrak's weapon tighter. A beam of light appeared in the command center. 3 figures materialized, tall with gray skin and large eyes. They wore simple white uniforms with no visible weapons. "Humans," the middle one said in perfect English. "I am Commander Zell of the Coalition. We have been looking for your kind." John kept his weapon raised. "Why?" "Because you fight the Vraks and survive. Few species can claim this." The Coalition took John and Alex aboard their ship, the Horizon. It was vast with curved walls that seemed to glow from within. Other alien species worked alongside the gray-skinned beings. Some looked almost human. Others were completely foreign. Zell led them to a large room with a holographic display of the galaxy. "The Vraks have hunted sentient species for thousands of years. We are what remains of those who survived. We call ourselves the Coalition." The display zoomed in on Earth. John's heart sank as he saw the battle raging around his home planet. Vrak's ships surrounded Earth while human vessels fought desperately. Your people have been fighting for 3 years, Zell said. Most of your colonies are gone. Earth stands alone. 3 years? Alex's voice broke. But we've only been awake for days. Time dilation from your ship's damaged drive, Zell explained. You were trapped in a pocket of slowed time. John stared at the images of Earth under siege. We need to help them. We want to help, Zell said. But our council requires proof that humans are worth the risk. The Vraks hunt us all, but they fear humans most. Your strategies are unpredictable. You sacrifice yourselves for others, a concept the Vraks cannot understand. What kind of proof? John asked. Zell changed the display to show a massive space station. This is a Vraks hunting preserve. They keep captured beings here before releasing them on planets to be hunted. We believe many humans are held there. If you can free them and gather intelligence on Vraks fleet movements, the Coalition will commit to your war. John studied the station. It was heavily defended, but he saw weaknesses in its design. We'll do it. The Coalition provided them with weapons, armor, and a small stealth ship. John and Alex trained with alien allies for 2 weeks, learning to use their technology and fight as a team. The mission began with a silent approach to the station. Their ship attached to an outer hull and they cut their way inside. The plan was simple. John would free the prisoners while Alex hacked the Vrak systems for fleet information. They moved through dark corridors, avoiding Vraks patrols. John found the prison section and began opening cells. Inside were humans, but also dozens of other species. Some were injured. Others looked broken by captivity. We're getting you out, John told them. Follow me and stay quiet. As the prisoners moved toward the escape point, John received an urgent message from Alex. John, they're not just keeping humans prisoner. They're experimenting on them. They're trying to create some kind of super soldier with human DNA. Get the data and meet at the extraction point, John ordered. He led the prisoners to the docking bay where their ship waited. As the last group boarded, an alarm blared through the station. Vrak soldiers poured into the bay. Go! John shouted to Alex, who had just arrived with the data. Get them out of here. Not without you, she yelled back. John fired at the approaching Vraks, creating cover. The mission matters more than one soldier. Tell Earth we're coming to help. He pushed Alex into the ship and sealed the door from outside. As the ship detached, John turned to face the Vraks, buying time for the escape. The last thing he saw was the ship safely clearing the station before something hard hit the back of his head. He woke strapped to a cold metal table, bright lights blinding him. A Vraks in a medical uniform leaned over him with a gleaming surgical tool. This human will make an excellent specimen, it said to others watching from behind glass. John stared at the surgical tool hovering above his eye. His mind raced despite the drugs in his system. The Vraks scientist moved the blade closer. Wait, John said, his voice stronger than he felt. Your laws say a worthy prey deserves a clean death in combat. The Vraks paused. The others behind the glass clicked and hissed in their language. A larger Vraks entered the room. Its armor was decorated with bones and metal pieces, trophies from kills. This was a leader. The human knows our ways, the leader said. Interesting. I challenge your champion, John said. If I win, I live. The leader laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. You will die either way, but yes, you may die with honor instead of on a table. They took John to a circular room with metal walls. His restraints were removed, but the drugs made his movements slow. A weapon rack stood on one wall. The Vraks leader pointed to it. Choose. Then face Kraz, our greatest hunter. John selected a short blade similar to a combat knife. It was the lightest weapon available. His opponent entered. A massive Vraks with scars covering its scaled skin. It carried a long, curved sword. The fight began badly for John. Kraz was faster, stronger, and not drugged. The blade cut John's arm, then his leg. Blood dripped onto the metal floor. The watching Vraks clicked in excitement, but John had studied them. He knew their pride was their weakness. Is this your best? John taunted, circling away from Kraz's attacks. The Coalition said Vraks were dangerous. I'm disappointed. Kraz roared and charged. John dodged at the last second. The Vrax's momentum carried it into the wall. John struck quickly, driving his knife into the soft spot behind Kraz's knee joint, a weakness he had observed during his time hiding on the Artemis. Kraz fell but swung wildly, catching John across the chest. Both fighters were wounded now. The room fell silent as they circled each other. "Humans are prey," Kraz hissed. "You exist to make us stronger." "Then why are you afraid of us?" John asked. "Why experiment on us? You fear what you don't understand." This time, when Kraz attacked, John was ready. He dropped to the floor and thrust upward with his blade. It found the gap in Kraz's armor under the arm. The Vrax champion fell, green blood pooling beneath it. The leader stepped forward, mandibles clicking in what might have been approval. "You have earned life, human. You will join my personal collection." For weeks, John lived as the leader's prisoner. He was kept in a cage in the leader's quarters, studied like an exotic pet. But he watched. He listened. He learned. The leader, called Vexkar, spoke freely around John. Vrax believed humans couldn't understand their complex language, but John had been learning since his time on the Artemis. He discovered the truth about Vrax society. They believed hunting made species evolve. They saw themselves as the force that pushed the galaxy forward through natural selection. "The strong survive," Vexkar told his subordinates during a meeting. "Humans are becoming strong. This is why we must end them now before they challenge us." John learned of their plan, a bioweapon designed to target human DNA. It would be deployed on Earth within months. As Vexkar's status grew from capturing a human warrior, rivals emerged. Another commander challenged his leadership. The Vrax camp fell into chaos as factions formed. During a particularly violent confrontation, John's cage was damaged. He escaped while the Vrax fought among themselves. He stole the bioweapon data and a small ship. The escape was desperate. Alarms blared as John launched the ship toward Coalition space. Vrax vessels pursued, weapons firing. His stolen ship took heavy damage. John reached a Coalition outpost, barely conscious. His body was failing from radiation exposure when the ship's shields had collapsed during his escape. Coalition medics rushed him to their medical bay. Their faces grew grim as they scanned his body. "The radiation damage is too extensive," one told him. "I'm sorry, but you won't survive the night." John gripped the medic's arm. "The data. Earth needs the data." As darkness crept into the edges of his vision, John thought of home. A planet he might have just saved but would never see again. John opened his eyes to bright light. He was alive. The room around him was white and clean. Coalition medical equipment beeped steadily. "You should be dead," a voice said. Alex stood by his bed, older now, with a scar across her cheek. "How?" John asked, his voice rough. "Vrax technology. Their medical science is advanced. We used it to save you, but it changed you." John looked at his hands. His skin had a faint gray tint. When he moved, he felt stronger than before. "The data you brought saved Earth," Alex said. "The Coalition joined our fight. We've pushed the Vrax back, but they're planning something big. A final attack." John stood, testing his new body. "How long was I out?" 6 months. "Earth needs you, John. They're calling you the Protector now." Earth was not as John remembered. Cities lay in ruins. The sky was dark with smoke from constant battles. But humans fought on, alongside Coalition allies. Military leaders gathered around John as he explained what he had learned during captivity. The Vrax had a fundamental weakness: they couldn't understand self-sacrifice. It confused and frightened them. "We attacked their homeworld," John said. "Not to destroy them, but to deliver this." He held up a vial of clear liquid. "A modified version of their bioweapon. It will suppress their hunting instinct without killing them." "A suicide mission," a general said. "Their homeworld is too well defended." "I'll lead it," John replied. "I need volunteers only." 1,000 soldiers stepped forward. They called themselves the Protector's Guard. The mission was planned in secret, using Coalition ships modified with Vrax technology John had helped design. The battle began badly. Vrax defenses were stronger than expected. Ships exploded around John as they approached the planet. His vessel took heavy damage. "We won't reach the atmosphere," his pilot shouted over alarms. John moved to the escape pod where the bioweapon was stored. "Get the survivors out, I'll finish this." "How?" Alex asked from the command chair. She had insisted on coming despite John's objections. "Protector protocol," John said. He had never told anyone the full plan. The bioweapon needed a delivery system, a living host whose cells had been modified to spread the agent through the air. His cells. John launched his pod toward the planet as the ship broke apart behind him. Vrax fighters swarmed around him, but none fired. They wanted to capture him alive. The pod crashed in a Vrax city. John was injured but still moving. Vrax soldiers surrounded him, weapons ready. "I surrender," John said in their language. They took him to their leader, a massive Vrax with ceremonial armor. John's body was already releasing the bioweapon. Every breath the Vrax took brought them closer to change. "You have lost, human," the leader said. John smiled. "No, I've saved you from yourselves." Across the planet, Vrax began to change. The constant drive to hunt faded. Confusion spread. The Vrax fleet fell into disarray. Coalition forces seized the moment. The tide of war turned in a single day. 100 years later, a young Vrax child sat in a classroom. On the wall hung a picture of a human man with grayish skin. "Who is that?" the child asked its teacher. "That is the Protector," the teacher replied. "John Mercer. He saved both our species when he showed us another way to live." "Why do we all bear his name?" another child asked. The teacher touched the small mark on her wrist, a genetic marker all Vrax now carried. "Because part of him lives in all of us. Mercer's mark changed our biology, suppressed our predatory nature. Before him, we were hunters who destroyed. After him, we became builders who create." Outside the classroom window, Vrax and human ships flew side by side in peaceful skies. The war was a distant memory, but the Protector's legacy lived on in every Vrax child born with the capacity for compassion instead of only the drive to hunt. In the center of the capital city stood a simple statue of a human man. The inscription read only, "John Mercer, the Protector. He gave himself so others might live."